Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this is now starting with zakat of horses now. Now, so usually there's three types of animals that zakat is normally taken from, we agreed upon. So zakat of camels, zakat of cows, zakat of goats. And the main principle, the overarching principle of zakat is that this is something that we have been told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us about these exact zakat figures that we have to give, and that's why it's something which is tawaqquf. There's tawaqquf in there. It's not based upon ra'i. It's not based upon rationalizing it. So this is where now the issue of the khayl comes in, horse. Yeah. So the word horse, khayl. Some have mentioned of where this word actually originates from. So they've said, for example, like khayl is actually from the word khuyala, because khuyala means like to show off, to be boastful, arrogant. Because horses are like that. They seem as though they're quite arrogant creatures. Their necks are up in the air all the time. Yeah, tails are waving around. So they just seem a bit sort of like arrogant. And some have even said things like, the people who breed horses and take care of them are generally people who have a bit of sort of like arrogance in them, the way they behave. Allahu A'lam. But that's the meaning of the word khayl anyway. That some have linguistically mentioned. So he says, إذا كانت الخيل سائمة ذكورا وإناثا فصاحبها بالخيار. So when horses are سائمة means, remember, self-grazing. Self-grazing is more than six months or more. ذكورا وإناثا. So remember this point, okay, because we're going to come back to this. That male and female horses, so stallions and normal horses. I don't know, what's the word for female horses? Is it horse for female horse? Yeah, is it mare? Yeah, mare. Okay, so horse is just like a generic name for the whole family. And then so stallion, the male, and then. Now remember, what are they talking about? They are talking about horses as in Arab horses. Okay, just keep this in mind. Arabian horses. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen Arabian horses or know the difference. I learned this recently. I didn't know the difference. But Arabian horses are the ones that have long mouths, heads, yeah, and they have these large nostrils. So then the nose or the mouth is quite long, very thin, and the nostrils you can clearly see. So these are like the Arabian horses. They're supposed to be quite fast as well. So if you have the male and the female ones, right? These horses that you have, is there zakat upon them or not? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his position on this is you have to give zakat on them. Right? So he has a position which is a well-known position. Zakat is necessary on horses. Now, there is an ikhtilaf in this issue because of the types of narrations that have been reported about horse zakat. So he says, Sahibuha bil khayr. Remember, what is the nisab? How many horses do you need to have for you to have to give zakat? For camels, you have to have at least 5. For cows, at least 30. And for goats, at least 40. But for horses, there's an ikhtilaf of how many you need to have. Like what's been reported from Abu Hanifa of how many horses you need to have for the ruling to apply. Yeah. So he says, فَصَاحِبُهَا بِالْخِيَارِ. So in the Quduri text, it doesn't mention how many horses you need to have. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Yeah. So some have said you just need 1. Even if you have 1, you have to give zakat. Some have said no, you need at least 2, because if you need a male and a female, then you can't have just male or just female. So in order for you to have male and female, then logically there must be at least 2. Yeah. So some have said there needs to be at least 2, and some have said more. فَصَاحِبُهَا بِالْخِيَارِ. So then the owner now of the horses has a choice now when giving zakat. إِنْ شَاءَ أَعْطَى عَنْ كُلِّ فَرَسٍ دِينَارًا. Right? The word faras is another word for khayl. So khayl is like the generic term, and faras is for individuals. So if the owner wishes to give their zakat, they can either give their zakat for every horse 1 dinar, 1 gold coin. So in other words, it's as though 1 gold coin is 1/40th of a horse. Now, how did they figure that out? Again, this is where the ikhtilaf arises. That is there zakat in the horses, and how do you figure out 1 gold coin? So he says the owner can either give for every horse one gold coin. Maybe that is because the value of every horse is like 40 gold coins. Maybe that's where they got it from. In them days, the average horse was worth 40 gold coins. So therefore, if you have a horse, you give one gold coin 1/40th. Maybe that's where they got it from. But we don't clearly know. That's option number one. Option number two, in sha'a qawwamaha. So, or what you can do is you can evaluate your horse. You can find out the value in the market of your horse, right? وَأَعْطَى عَنْ كُلِّ مِئَتَيْ دِرْهَمٍ خَمْسَةَ دَرَاهِمْ. And for every 200 dirhams it comes up to, you give 5 silver coins. Yeah. So again, it's like you're using the concept of the silver coin, which is that you have to have 200 silver coins for zakat to be necessary on you. So therefore, you work it out in 200s. So if the horse is worth 400, so 200, 5 silver coins, 200, 5 silver coins, 10 silver coins altogether. And if you have 600, if you have a horse that's worth 600 dirhams, then you're going to give 5, 5, 5, which is 15. Okay, like that. So in other words, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah has given this two choice now. هذا عند أبي حنيفة رحمه الله تعالى وهو قول زفر, and this is also the opinion of Imam Zufar rahimahullah. Yeah, so very kind of like rarely will we find in Hidayah where Imam Hidayah will say Abu Hanifa and Zufar on the same sort of like position on this. So هذا عند and where did Imam Abu Hanifa get this from? So if you look in the Hashia over here, Binaya, it quotes Binaya and says وَبِهِ قَالَ حَمَّاد بن أبي سليمان. Yeah. So this is the teacher of Imam Sahib al-Hidayah. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, whose name is Hammad bin Abi Sulaiman. He held this position as well. In other words, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, sometimes when he holds a particular position, it might not be based upon a particular hadith. It might actually simply be that the early fuqaha, like the tabi'een or the sahaba, held this position. Yeah, because if you remember, once I told you, Hanafi madhab is predominantly based upon fatwa of the sahaba and the widespread practice of the early generation. So sometimes, if a tabi'i holds a particular position, that tabi'i, we would have good assumption about that tabi'i, and we would say that he must have got this from a sahabi who must have got this from the Prophet ﷺ. Does everyone understand that? Yeah, just like in usul hadith, when you come across the ruling of marfu hukman, yeah, a sahabi says something which he could not have formulated in his own mind, and he must have got it from the early generation. So we call this marfu hukman. In other words, the hadith is as though the Prophet ﷺ has said it. It's just that we can't imagine Sahaba making this up themselves, right? So the same thing applies over here. So Imam Hanifa is not just coming with this out of thin air. He is having trust. He's trusting his teachers and his early generation. He's saying, well, if they've said it, then I believe that they wouldn't have come out with it themselves. They would have come out with it based upon what they've heard from Sahaba and then thus the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, he says, وَقَالَ, and Sahibain say, لَا زَكَاةَ فِي الْخَيْلِ. They say there is no zakat at all in horses. Their position is very clear. The later Hanafis have actually given fatwa on the Sahibain's position. Yeah, so if you look over here in the Hashiyah, it says, في فتاوى Qadi Khan. So Qadi Khan is a scholar who was in the 500s, okay? Similar time as Imam Sahib al-Hidayah, but just before. He is considered an authority in fatwa. So if Qadi Khan, if he gives a fatwa on a certain thing, then usually that is the official position in the school. So he is also known for giving the fatwa that the feet of women are not considered awra when they go out, when they pray. They don't have to cover their feet up, basically. He holds that position. قالوا على الفتوى على قولهما. Sahibain's qawl is the fatwa one. Yeah, كذا رجح قوله في الأسرار. And other books, شمس الأئمة, تحفة, رجح. They have actually, so as for شمس الأئمة, most likely Sarakhsi, and Sahib al-Tuhfa, who's the matan of Badai' Sana'i', they've actually given tarjih of qawl of Abi Hanifa. So you see now there's two groups over here now. So if you have two groups of later Hanafis, you call this ikhtilaf of tasheeh. So remember this, okay? Ikhtilaf of tasheeh, meaning Abu Hanifa said this, Sahibain said this. Some of the later Hanafis have held Abu Hanifa's position, and some of the later Hanafis have held Sahibain's position. So you have a clash of later Hanafis. Whose view do you take? This is where, like in ifta, in fatwa, you learn how to give tarjih of two tasheehs. Yeah, so two tasheeh basically means preponderance. So when two different groups of later Hanafis have held two different positions from the early Hanafis, then here there's scope to take either sometimes, and sometimes you look at the stronger dalil. Okay? And I'm going to read to you guys from Badayat Sanai and from Bahr al-Raik, because Badayat Sanai and Bahr al-Raik have summarized this whole section about khayl in the best way that I've found so far. Really, really nicely. They've kind of like put it into a lot of, broken it down into an easy, digestible way. So, what's the Sahibain's argument? لقول عليه السلام ليس على المسلم في عبده ولا في فرسه صدقة. It's a very clear hadith that a Muslim does not have to give any zakat when it comes to his slave. So it doesn't matter how many slaves you have, you don't have to give any zakat. And it doesn't matter how many horses you have, you don't have to give any zakat on your slaves or your horses. So they say this is a very clear hadith, and it's strong hadith, so therefore this hadith should be taken. Of course, if the slave is for selling purposes, so a person has a business where they buy and sell slaves, or a person has a business where they buy and sell horses, then in that case, the horses and the slaves will now come under the business stock, inventory. So you'd have to give zakat on that based upon it now being a trade commodity. Otherwise, if it's not a trade commodity and you have horses, irrespective of why you've got those horses, whether you've got those horses for personal use, whether you've got those horses for the milk and the procreation, it doesn't really matter. It's there's no zakat on it, they say. So would this fall under hajatul asliya? So if the horse, if you are feeding the horse yourself, right? If you're feeding the horse yourself, then it's yours. So it's your personal, you spent on it. So therefore, you don't have to give zakat on it. But if you have a horse, and you're not using it for carrying things, right? You're not using it to carry a carriage or anything else, pull a carriage, then that's hajat al-asliya. Otherwise, it's zakatable. Does that make sense? So hajat al-asliya is only when you're using it for something specific. Otherwise, Imam Abu Hanifa would say that you'd have to give zakat, just like the camels. If you've got camels, as long as they are self-grazing camels, right? Even if you sort of ride a camel or whatever, if you have 5 of them, you're gonna have to give zakat. وَلَهُ قَوْلُهُ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's statement, Abu Hanifa's dalil is في كل فرس. Now there is a hadith regarding this. في كل فرس سائمة دينار أو 10 دراهم. Every single horse, just like in usul fiqh you guys have done, that if you have kullu, it comes for am. It comes for inclusive of all. So kullu farasin, in every single horse, sa'imatin, that is self-grazing, you must give 1 dinar, 1 gold coin, or 10 darahim, or 10 gold coins. Now, if you look at the hadith that has been mentioned, the riwayah. So look at number 2 there. It says أخرج الدارقطني عن جابر قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في كل فرس دينار تؤديه. There's a lot of kalam in this hadith, where scholars have declared the hadith to be da'if or problematic or mukhtalaf fihi. But like we said, that doesn't really matter, because like we said, this is proven from the tabi'een that they held a position about the horse. So if they're holding a position, for us that seems to be almost, you can say, on par with a hadith. Okay, so that's the hadith that Sahib al-Hidayah brings for Abu Hanifa. Whether this exact hadith is the dalil that Abu Hanifa was looking at when he was coming to his conclusion, we don't know. Maybe there was a hadith that existed in that time and he's taken that hadith. وَتَأْوِيلُ مَا رَوَيَاهُ. Now then, what about the hadith that they've mentioned? لَيْسَ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِ فِي عَبْدِهِ وَلَا فِي فَرَسِهِ صَدَقَةٌ. How do we then interpret that? Because now you have the clash of hadith now. So in usul, as you guys know, that when you have a situation where two hadith seem to be clashing with each other, you have to, follow a specific procedure in how to come to a conclusion. So generally, the Hanafis use a three-step procedure. Okay, Noon. Just remember like this: Noon, Jim, Ta. So first of all, they look to which hadith has been abrogated. So if one has been abrogated, they leave that and they'll take the other one. Number two, if they can't find any signs of abrogation, what they do is they reconcile the two. They try their best to reconciliation. And number three, if they can't do reconciliation, then what they do is they do tarjih. Yeah, tarjih. Yeah. So what's tarjih? Basically, they give preference of the strength of one over the other. So they'll declare one to be strong and the other one to be weak. Okay. And if they can't do that, then they declare the two hadith to be in stalemate. Right? Tawaqquf. They say tawaqquf, you stop. Okay. So here's a situation where you have ta'arud. Ta'arud, clearly two hadith. One hadith seems to be saying there's no sadaqah in faras. And one hadith clearly seems to be saying you have to give 1 dinar or 10 silver coins when it comes to a horse. So he says, ta'weelu ma rawayahu. So we can't find nasakh, so we have to go to step 2, jama. So we're doing ta'weel. Jama requires ta'weel, interpretation. And this is like a very important thing. If you want to go into the science of mushkil al-hadith, the best book I would definitely encourage you guys to read would be 2 books of Imam Tahawi's, Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar and Sharh Mushkil al-Athar. Yeah. So Sharh Mushkil al-Athar is a 16-volume work, and he's attempted to try and bring all those hadith that seem to be clashing with each other, and he presents arguments of how we can bring them together. Yeah, and this is very good for the student of knowledge, because what it does is it opens you up into how to think in different ways about evidences as well. Yeah, so again, the concept of ta'weel ma rawayahu. So in other words, the ta'weel of ma rawayahu, the ta'weel of what they have reported, is farasul ghazi. So he says the way that we interpret this is the horse that is used in battle. Yeah. So in other words, a horse that is used in battle, that's what it's referring to. In other words, if it's a horse which is for personal use, yeah, a horse that is for personal use, then that is considered to be exempted. That's the way around it, basically. Yeah. So if it's a horse, and obviously when you use it in battle, that's for your personal use. So this is why if you look at this, it says in the Hashia, Farasul Ghazi lima qarana Nabi sallallahu al-faras bil abd, because the Prophet sallallahu has joined the word slave with faras in the same hadith. So kana dhalika qarina, that is a clue ala anna al-murad abd al-khidma, that this servant is known as the servant who is for service, and faras al-rukub, and the horse that's used for riding, not just your extra horses that you have. Yeah, so answering Sister Khalid's question about the horses themselves, like if it's for personal use. So فإنهما إذا كان للتجارة, if these two things are for tijara, then تجب فيه الزكاة بالإجماع. Zakat is necessary by consensus. Are they both all in Arabic, Ustaz? Yes, they're all in Arabic. Yeah, so I don't think anyone's done translation of them into English. Maybe Sharh Ma'ani Athar, maybe someone's done work on it, I'm not too sure. Okay, so وهو المنقول عن زيد ibn Thabit, and also on top of that, he's saying that this is actually reported from Zayd ibn Thabit. In other words, Zayd ibn Thabit has actually clarified that this hadith is referring to a horse for battle. Yeah, so horse for battle, this is basically what it's referring to. So what's that narration then? So here in the bottom, he's actually the Hashis brought it. It says وقعت هذه الحادثة في زمن مروان. In the time of Marwan, who was a governor, then he became the Khalifa. شاور الصحابة, he consulted the Sahaba regarding horse zakat. فروى أبو هريرة ليس, so Abu Huraira said, ليس على الرجل في عبده ولا في فرس صدقة. He said there's no sadaqah in a person who has a slave or a horse. فقال Marwan said to Zayd ibn Thabit, ماذا تقول يا أبا سعيد? Yeah, so Abu Sa'id was his nickname, Zayd ibn Thabit. So remember, Zayd ibn Thabit is the same guy who is responsible for the compilation of the Quran as well. So he was a very knowledgeable person, and they, he was a katib al-wahy as well. So he says, قال أبو هريرة. So فقال أبو هريرة عجبا من Marwan. So he goes, what a strange thing. Marwan, I am narrating a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Marwan is asking, even after I've told him the hadith, he's asking Zayd about his view. ماذا تقول؟ فقال زيد صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما أراد بي فرس الغازي. So he said, the Prophet ﷺ has spoken the truth, obviously. I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is, Abu Hurairah didn't understand the ta'wil of the hadith. And this is a very important point for Hanafis, when they mention about in Usul al-Shashi, that if there's a Sahabi who is not famous for ijtihad and he reports a hadith that goes against qiyas, then, So over here you can clearly see Abu Hurairah quoted the hadith. He did not seem to, he took the zahir meaning of the hadith, whereas Zayd ibn Thabit seems to be a much more knowledgeable person than him. He understood like an underlying ta'wil interpretation of this hadith. Yeah, and he said, hadith is correct, but Abu Hurairah has not taken the correct meaning of faras here. Faras actually refers to the faras of ghazi, the one that is used for battle, the one that a person like has reserved for battle purposes. Does everyone understand that? Yeah. So why is it important for Hanafis to know this? Because like I said, these two books, Ta'wil, Mushkil al-Athar, Mushkil al-Athar, and Sharh al-Athar, these actually not only give you hadith, but they also give you interpretation of a hadith. Because without interpretation of a hadith, there are so many hadith that will like literally they seem to be clashing and don't make sense. There's lots of hadith out there where it don't seem to make sense, but the scholars, alhamdulillah, they clarify these things for us. Okay, so here's an example of clarification. Okay, so that's done then, and then he says, وَالتَّخِيرُ, وَالتَّخِيرُ, and as for the choice, why does Abu Hanifa give the choice then and says you can either give for each horse 1 gold coin? Yeah, so if you got 10 horses, for each horse 1 gold coin. So 1, 2, 3, 10. And or at taqweem, or you can valuate the horse, and then if the value of the horse reaches 200, for every 200 of its value, you have to give 5 silver coins. Yeah. He says this is actually ma'thurun, reported from Umar radiallahu anhu. Again, if Umar radiallahu anhu has mentioned this, and he is a Sahabi, he couldn't have made this up in his mind. He couldn't have formulated it in his own head, because we would assume that the Sahaba they wouldn't tamper, right? They wouldn't dabble in these kind of masail that are zakat masail that are based upon fixed figures that are reported from the legislator, Allah and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. Yeah, so this is why he says this is ma'thur from Umar. Now, if you look in the Hashia at the bottom, yeah, he actually brings this. أخرج الطحاوي في شرح معاني آثار عن مالك and Zuhri, and then he says قال رأيت أبي يقوم الخيل. So he says Sa'ib ibn Yazid, yeah, أخبره قال, I saw my father valuating horses, ويدفع صدقتها إلى عمر بن الخطاب, and he would give the sadaqah to Umar. Yeah, so now look, this is Imam Tahawi is bringing this cases where people would bring their zakat of their horses to Umar. So that's a strong sort of like compelling evidence. وأخرج الإمام أبو حنيفة, and also Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah has also reported this, yeah, in Kitab al-Athar. So Imam Muhammad has a book called Kitab al-Athar, and in there he says Abu Hanifa has reported from Hamad and Ibrahim al-Nakha'i أنه قال في الخيل السائمة التي يطلب نسلها, the one who are bred for their progeny, meaning not the ones that you keep for your personal use. إذا شئت في كل فرس دينار, if you want, then for every horse give 1 gold coin. وإن شئت 10 دراهم, if you want to give, or if you want 10. Why 10? Because in them days 1 gold coin was actually equal to 10 silver coins. So that's where the 10 comes from. Yeah, so the 1 gold coin you can give, And if you don't have a gold coin and you got silver coins, then you can give 10. وإن شئت فالقيمة, and if you want, then the value. Yeah. ثم كان في كل 200 درهم, and then once you evaluated it, then every 200 200 dirham, 5 دراهم, then you give 5 silver coins. Yeah. So again, see how he kind of like resolves this masala. Yeah. Again, very important for any Hanafi student, I would say, is to read Sharh Ma'ani Athar. Even if you read like, maybe it would be good if like some of you guys got together, you had just like a reading. Yeah, you have your little group, 1 or 2 or 3, whatever people, and you just read once a week or once every 2 weeks, and then you just try to understand what it's saying, and you go through it systematically, like a maqra, and that way, you become more exposed to a lot more texts out there. Obviously, I don't have time to teach these books. If I did have time, it would have been good to teach this book or even other books as well, but that's something that you guys can do. All right. Now I'm going to come back to certain points that we mentioned above, but let's finish this section and then we'll come back. He says, وَلَيْسَ فِي ذُكُورِهَا مُنْفَرِدَةً زَكَاتٌ. There is no zakat if there are only male horses. Yeah, so if there's only stallions you've got. So basically, let's say, for example, like I've got horses, and I've only got male horses. I've got 10 male horses, right? Then there's no zakat. Why is this for? What's the rational argument? They're still horses, aren't they? They still have value. He goes, yes, they have value, but لِأَنَّهَا لَا تَتَنَاسَلْ, because males obviously cannot procreate. Yeah. So if you've got males only, clearly if you have 10 males, by the end of the year, you're still going to have 10 males or less. They're not going to increase. Yeah, biologically it's not possible. وَكَذَا فِي الْإِنَاثِ, and likewise when it comes to females on their own, the mares. So you only have mares. Yeah. The jama of mare is mares, isn't it? It's not like some other jama, is it? Zafar, I'm learning English from Zafar. Zafar, you're teaching me English, bro. Okay, so كذا في الإناث المنفردات, yeah? So إناث منفردات. In other words, if I had 10 female horses, there's 2 riwayas about this now. There's 2 riwayas. Now I want you to think about this now. I want to think, why would there be 2 riwayas of females? If I've got 10 female horses and I've got them for 1 year, I'm still going to have 10 females, aren't I? Right? Because clearly horses cannot procreate. Yeah, cannot create progeny or give birth without procreation, without mating with males. And there's no males there. There's only 10 females. So there's 2 riwayas on this. One riwayah is there is no zakat. Okay, there is no zakat on female, just like there's no zakat on males, simply because la tatanasal. Because even though females can give birth, but because they require male semen, there's no possibility that they're there. That's one view. The second riwayah, wa anhu al-wujubu fiha, that no, you have to give zakat on the females. Why is this for? This is I think this is a very good way of looking at fiqh sometimes, where what we call contextualization. So sometimes you might have a masala, and that masala is given in a vacuum, and in a vacuum it sounds perfect, but when you put it into context in the real world of how things really work, you realize there's elements that you actually missed out, and therefore your answer isn't like absolutely correct. It's not accurate. So in the olden days, if a person, let's say I have 10 female horses, what I would normally do is I would go to the farm down the road, a guy who has a stallion, and I'd ask him, can I have the stallion for a week? And what I would normally do is I would pay him, but the Prophet ﷺ prohibited payment like this. Yeah, this was known as, where in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would do this practice. Yeah, like they would call it nazwun, and the Prophet ﷺ prohibited taking a fee where you're paying someone to borrow their male animal to mate with the females. Yeah, because this type of bait in Kitab al-Buyu, this type of bait is it's something which is not considered to be certain. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty in there. Like I could bring the male horse and I could leave it with the females and then come after a week and maybe nothing's happened. Or maybe they procreate, but this is like there's no birth, right? So that can happen. So this is why the Hanafi say you can't charge for borrowing a stallion. All right. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he would allow like giving a gift. So it doesn't officially come under payment. It comes under like as a a will of good gesture, yeah, or a gesture of goodwill rather. So he says لأنها تتناسل بالفحل المستعار, because normally when a person has only females, they can bring a male stallion, they can leave it with the females, and then after a few days, the male stallion will mate with the females, and then one or two might become pregnant. Okay, so that's why, see how Abu Hanifa was looking at this. He might have seen this in his society at that time, that there were some people that actually used to do this. They would only have females, but then they would do this. بخلاف الذكور, as opposed to dhukur, you can't do that with males. Like I can't have 10 males and then bring a female and mate, because obviously even if the female mates with the males, the females doesn't belong to me, it belongs to someone else, right? So, now I was just thinking of this masala, like in today's times, I don't know how horse breeders or even other farmers, how they deal with this kind of issue, but I have seen like a documentary on this, how nowadays what they actually use is they use artificial insemination. So they actually have like this the male, and they take from there. Obviously they extract the semen from there, and then they'll inseminate the female through this, and they do this a lot with racehorses. So racehorses, because they have a strong breed, pedigree, and people, it's like sought after, very expensive. So they'll do it in today's, and it's actually very successful. In the olden days, it wouldn't be something like, it wouldn't be possible in them days to be able to do this, because they wouldn't have the ability to do IVF, right? Where nowadays they can do it. They can actually take the egg from a female and they can do all that and then put it back into the female horse. So again, if that is possible in today's times, and it's something that's common, because to get a cow to give milk, it has to be pregnant, it has to have given birth. So these are things to kind of think about. I mean, besides that, I don't know if there's any other sort of like way that this is done, but I'm sure that with technology developing, there's going to be some other methods. بخلاف الذكور, as opposed to the males on their own. That's the second riwayah. Okay, third riwayah. وعنه أنها تجب في الذكور المنفردة أيضا. So Abu Hanifa has a third opinion, which says even if you have males on their own, then you still have to give zakat on this. But why is that though? Why is that if I have 10 stallions, why is it that I have to give zakat on the 10 stallions, even though clearly the 10 stallions cannot grow, they can't grow any bigger, as in they can't increase in number, they can't become 11 or 12. Because some of them say, well, like if you feed the male enough, it grows like in mass. Yeah, so they're looking at it from the point of mass. But again, that's another issue, that just because it's growing in mass, it doesn't mean that it's a productive animal. Anyway, we're going to have a look, just keep that in mind. We're going to have a look at Badai and Bahar, see what they say about this as well. Okay, so that's a khulasa. The summary of this is Abu Hanifa has three views with regards to horses. Number one is there's no zakat if there's only males. Number two is there's no zakat if there's only females. There's no zakat if there's only males, there's no zakat on the females. That's the first view. Second view, there is zakat if there's only females. And the third view is there is zakat if there's only males. Right? So as a Hanafi student, what do I have to do with this? So what I have to do with this is I have to try and understand what the reason for each one is. Once you understand the reason for each one, it gives you a much bigger picture. It makes you understand how the fuqaha used to think as well. Yeah, their thought process. Okay. Okay. ولا شيء, and then he says, ولا شيء في البغال والحمير لقول عليه السلام لم ينزل علي فيهما شيء. So what about بغل? بغال is a jam of بغل, which is a mule, and hamir is a jam of himar, which is a donkey. So there is no zakat according to Hanafis if you're breeding donkeys or mules, no zakat in them. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing from Allah was revealed to me about their ruling. It's as though the Prophet ﷺ used to wait for Allah to tell him about these kind of matters. Yeah, so he says there was no decision from Allah about what happens with these. وَالْمَقَادِيرُ تَثْبُتُ سَمَاعًا. And the measurements in Sharia, the Sharia measurements in zakat, called the maqadir, the miqdar, right? These are only established through hearing, meaning it's not based upon rationalization. So there's no rationalization when it comes to zakat figures. It's all based upon sami'na, that's it. We've heard, khalas. However, remember I told you when that Sarakhsi's point with regards to the camels and all that. There are some Hanafis who do rationalize, and they'll say, well, why can't we rationalize? Why can't we say there is some rationale behind it? Yeah. إلا أن تكون للتجارة, unless obviously the donkeys you're breeding and horses, mules, are for selling purposes. Yeah, and then they'll fall under sale commodity, right? And then that's where there's zakat there. لأن الزكاة حينئذ تتعلق بالمالية. Because in that case, zakat is then associated with their value now, right? It's no longer associated with the flesh itself. It's now to do with value. كسائر أموال التجارة. Just like the rest of the business stock, yeah, inventory you have. So if I've got a business, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the chapter of business stock. If I've got a business and I've got stock, like I'm selling, I don't know, cakes, or I'm selling computers, or I'm selling things, and I've bought these things with the purpose of sale, then I have to give zakat on their value, right? It's on their value. So the same goes with mules and donkeys, okay? And it goes for anything for that matter. Wallahu alam, Allah knows best. All right. So let's now have a look at what Badai says in this now. So I read a few texts on this. I read Badai Sanai, I read Jawharatul Nayyira, Bahr al-Ra'iq, Durul al-Hukam, and Radul Muhtar. Yeah, I read some others, but I just didn't bother quoting them because they were kind of repeating the same thing, and I didn't really find anything more interesting that was mentioned by them. So first of all, let me mention to you what Badai says, because obviously he comes after Hidayah. He kind of like is the next guy. So he says, look, he says horses, إما أن تكون ألوفة, are either fed by the owner, right? So either hand-fed, or they are self-grazing. And if they are hand-fed, such that a person feeds them themselves for riding purposes, or for carrying purposes, so you have horses that carry things, or for jihad purposes, meaning for warfare, for battle, then there's no zakat on it. Yeah, so remember that. So horses, you've either got them self-grazing, or you're grazing them. You're feeding them. If you're feeding them, then you're either feeding them because you want it for personal use, like riding, carrying, or jihad. Yeah, then there's no zakat in it. Why? Because it is preoccupied with the haja. Yeah, in other words, it is preoccupied with personal usage. And the mal of zakat can only be necessary on wealth which is productive. And in this case, because you're using it for personal use, it clearly clashes with productivity, because productivity means increase in value. You get profit. And if you're using it yourself, there's no profit there. And however, if you're feeding it yourself, but you're not doing it for these three things, you're doing it for sale purposes, like you're feeding it because you want it to sell it off, then you have to give zakat on it. Yeah, so if you're feeding it, you've got to give zakat, because now it falls under productive wealth. It's become business, yeah, mal. And he says, obviously the evidence is simply that tijara, business. And then he says, however, number 2, if the animal is actually self-grazing, so for majority of the year, the animal is self-grazing, sa'ima, فَإِنْ كَانَتْ تُسَامُ لِلرُّكُوبِ. So if you're self-grazing the animal, but you're self-grazing it for personal use, or you're self-grazing it for carrying stuff, loads, or you're self-grazing it for jihad, فَلَا zakata. Then there's still no zakat, because personal use overrides everything. Okay. وَإِنْ كَانَتْ, however, if it's self-grazing for business, then without a doubt there's zakat. Okay. This is Abu Hanifa and Sahibain seem to be unanimous on this, right? Right, now here's where the ikhtilaf starts. The ikhtilaf starts if you're breeding these animals, so if it's a self-grazing animal, and you're breeding it for the milk, yeah, and for the progeny. He says that's where the issue arises. The ikhtilaf between Sahibain say no zakat on it, and Abu Hanifa says that if the animals are a mixture of males and females, then Abu Hanifa says you have to give zakat on it. Yeah, and how do you give zakat? Well, you give either one gold coin for each horse, or you valuate it, and then whatever value it is, you work out in 200s. Yeah, 5 silver coins per every 200. And if, however, there's only females, he says, there's 2 riwayas from Abu Hanifa on this. I'm just quoting, I'm just quickly trying to read to you what Bidayah. I just want to show you that the tartib of Bidayah is very, very nice. He says, if the horses are only female, then there's 2 riwayas from Abu Hanifa about this. Meaning, one is zakat is wajib, and the other one is not. And he says, Imam Tahawi has quoted this. So see this opinion. This opinion, that Abu Hanifa has 2 opinions about the inath. This seems to have come from Tahawi. Tahawi is the guy that's actually the earliest person that's quoted this. In his book Athar, yeah, Sharh Ma'ani Athar. And Abu Yusuf and Muhammad's opinion is there is no zakat in any type of horse at all, except if it's for business purposes. Yeah. Okay. Then after that, he goes into some dalils of, Shafis as well in this. And now, here's an important point that Imam Hidayah doesn't mention, and I thought I'd highlight this to you guys. One of the reasons why the Sahibain say there's no zakat in horses, besides the hadith that's been quoted, okay? The argument is this. They say that zakat of self-grazing animals must have a nisab. Like when we talked about camels, we said it has to be 5 at least, and 30 cows, 40 goats, yeah? There's no nisab in horses. So it doesn't seem to make sense that this seems to be a clue that why would there be zakat in horses if there's no nisab mentioned? Yeah, so it's a strong argument that is, and that's possibly the reason why later Hanafis have opted for Sahibain's opinion over Abu Hanifa's opinion on this. So he says that zakat of self-grazing animals requires a nisab, specific nisab, and the Sharia has not specified anywhere of how many horses you need to have before zakat becomes necessary. Yeah, so why all this discussion about zakat when there is no nisab for them? Okay, now obviously Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he brings like athar and narrations for Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and he also brings the same argument to respond to the hadith and says that the hadith that they use is Zayd ibn Thabit interpreted the interpretation. Okay, and then finally he says, however, if they are only females or only males, he says, then what? Then he says there's a riwayah that says there still has to give zakat on it, based upon the idea that like camels. So if you have camels, cows, horses, zakat has to be given in them, even if all of them are females or even if all of them are males. Yeah, so this is the argument. They're saying that when it comes to horses, camels and all that, he says you have to give zakat over there as well, even if it's only females, even if it's only horses. Sahib al-Hidayah doesn't mention this. Now, is this an agreed upon opinion? Like, is this agreed upon that if you only have male camels, you have to give? Because if you have male camels, they're not producing any other camels, yeah, progeny. So therefore, how is it zakat? How is there zakat on this? So this is why then he says, however, the sahih position that there's no zakat in them, because zakat can only be decided on those animals that provide you with milk and provide you with progeny. And excessive flesh, the meat increasing, the size of the flesh of the body increasing, is never been a factor for zakat. It's always been productivity, and productivity is measured in 2 things: milk and this. And again, one in Bahr Raik, so that's Badai Sana is finished. In Bahr Raik, it mentions another good point. It says basically that according to Imam Abu Hanifa, you can't even eat horse flesh and drink its milk. You can't even do that because he doesn't allow horses to be eaten. He considers it makruh tahrimi. Yeah. And Sahibain do allow it. So he says then obviously it doesn't even make sense to take that view, that the flesh view. But anyway, Bahr al-Raik has then, later on, he's mentioned that nearly all the later Hanafis, Muhit, Badai, Tabyin, have all kind of said the same sort of thing. They've kind of taken the position of Sahibain on this issue. And he says, أن الفتوى على قولهما, and they've done إجماع أن الإمام لا يأخذ منهم صدقة الخيل, that the government is not permitted to take the zakat of horses from individuals. It's left to them. Okay, one last thing here, and then we'll finish off on this. He says, okay, where is it? Yeah. So he's kind of like copied what Bidayah Sanaya said, but he mentions this extra point Bidayah doesn't mention. He says that where is this point? Yeah, so he says this rule only applies to Arab horses. As for non-Arab horses, he says then you have to work out their value. You don't have this choice of giving a gold coin for every horse. He says that gold coin for every horse only works with Arab horses because their structure is very similar. Whereas non-Arab horses, they differ in size. So see, what happens is Hanafis over time realize that fatwas that were given in the past sometimes are localized fatwas based upon the urf and the convention of their particular society. And then when obviously Muslims began to spread and they began to live in different places and they saw that horses differed a lot. So you can Google this yourself and find out the different breeds of horses around the world, and you'll find big differences between them. Arab horses look almost similar, very similar structure they have, their physique, but non-Arab horses are very different, right? So you get these massive horses, you get smaller horses, and if you've ever ridden a horse, you'll know that there's difference between the sizes as well. Okay, and that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else that I wanted to mention. Okay, does a Rad mention anything? Let me just have a quick check of Rad. Okay, so yeah, so like I said, he just goes and proves that the fatwa is upon Sahibain's opinion by his time. The fatwa has been put on Sahibain's opinion. And Fatul Qadir, Fatul Qadir is an interesting figure because he follows Dalil a lot. And that's why he actually takes Abu Hanifa's qawl here. Yeah, he's got this very famous statement of his which says that you can't shift away from Abu Hanifa's qawl unless Abu Hanifa's qawl is da'if. Yeah. Is da'if in Dalil. Okay, now I just want to read to you what Radd al-Muhtar says right at the end. After mentioning all these opinions, he says, وَرَجَّحَهُ الْإِمَامِ سَرَخْسِي فِي الْمَبْسُوط. So Imam Sarakhsi has given preference to Imam Abu Hanifa's qawl. Quduri has given preference to Abu Hanifa's qawl, not in this book, but in Tajreed. So Tajreed is a 13-volume book. وأجاب عما أساه يورد على دليل والصاحب البداية والصاحب الهداية وهذا القول أقوى حجة. Yeah, and then he says that they've said, he doesn't say this himself, but he says they've said that this is Fathul Qadir saying this, that Abu Hanifa's qawl is stronger in Dalil according to what's been mentioned in Tajreed and Mabsut. In other words, if you read Tajreed and Mabsut, you'll actually find that the way they presented Abu Hanifa's argument is very strong. It's a very strong, compelling argument that they presented for him. Yeah, so if you want to read more about that, then definitely read it in there as well. And that's it really, anything else. Okay, so if you have any questions, please leave your questions in the comments. Let's just summarize what we did today. So zakat of khayl horses. We said that Abu Hanifa's position about horses is very clear, that you only have to give zakat on horses if they are self-grazing and you have a mixture of male and female. What if you have only males? then Abu Hanifa has two views about that. Or if you have only females, he's got two views about that. Sahibain say that there's no zakat on these. And how does Abu Hanifa work out the zakat? It was based upon the tabi'een's qawl and the sahaba's qawl about the 1 gold for each horse or 5 silver coins for the valuation of each horse that reaches 200. And how do we respond to the Sahibain's dalil? So we say that the faras mentioned in the hadith of the Sahibain, we say this is a faras for personal use, farasul ghazi. And this has also been reported from Zayd ibn Thabit and from Umar radiallahu anhu. And then, what about other animals like donkeys and mules? I mean, nowadays there's like other animals that look similar to like these kind of creatures. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's I don't think there's another creature that looks similar to a horse. Yeah, but maybe, I mean, some species that they've considered to be not to be horses, to be like from a different. And bighal, basically, does not belong to you guys know what a baghal is, don't you? A baghal is basically a donkey and a horse come together. Yeah, a donkey and a horse come together. Yeah, and the mother is basically is the what was it? It's a male and the male is the horse and the female is the donkey, isn't it? That's how is that how it is? Yeah. I keep forgetting this masla. Yeah, because they say you can't breed the other way around. So let me just quickly. Mule from. Yeah, so mule is a domestic unique hybrid between a donkey and a horse. A male donkey and a female horse, that's it. Male donkey, so a mule has to be strange from a male donkey. So the father has to be a donkey and the mother is a horse. You can't get the other way around. It's very rare to get the other way around. Yeah, where the mother is a donkey and the father is a horse. There's a name for it. I can't remember what that name is. Yeah, if you guys find that name, I keep forgetting what that name is as well. But yeah, so that's basically what they say about this. Okay, any questions? Translation done on Sharma Thar. Okay, excellent. You can check that out, Amina. So please find time to teach us the two books. Inshallah, when I die, inshallah, you come to my qabr, yeah? And from my qabr, inshallah, like a shaheed I'll be. Oh, hinni, that's it, it's a hinni. Yeah, hinni is like a very rare to ever get a female donkey that gives birth to, the crossbreed. And the interesting thing is the baghal it's infertile as well. Yeah, so it can't, it's sterile, it can't give birth. Yeah, it can't produce. All right, any other questions, guys? No. All right, guys, take care, inshallah, and I'll see you guys next week. Yes, I downloaded the book in iBooks. You're welcome. Yes, take care. Assalamu alaikum.